study, aesthetic enjoyment, things of that sort. I can mention now that in conversations with US EPA regarding the standards amendments, there was a comment that EPA may not approve the deletion of the REC 2 objectives, or that they may decline to take action, in which case the fecal coliform REC 2 objectives would remain in place, although it is explicitly acknowledged, as I've mentioned, that there is no scientific basis for the REC 2 objectives. EPA has expressed a desire for a numeric objective for REC 2, and I'll talk a little bit in just a moment about how the amendments approach the need to address water quality protection in REC 2 only designated waters. The amendments also include a narrative pathogen objective comparable to other narrative objectives in the basin plan. And effectively, this is waste discharges shall not cause or contribute to excessive risk of illness from microorganisms that are pathogenic to human beings. And the objective goes on with some additional text. But the concept here is to provide us an additional regulatory tool should we find that we have pathogen concerns based on evidence, but not necessarily related to E. coli or other identified bacterial indicators. The amendments also include changes to REC 1 and in some cases REC 2 designations for specific water segments in 4 streams. And these recommendations, changes, were derived through use attainability analyses, which included consideration of whether or not the uses were existing as defined. That means would the water quality support the use, and is there evidence of actual use? The uses that cannot be attained by the imposition of more stringent effluent limits or controls on non-point sources. In other words, improving water quality is not going to suffice to attain those uses. And consideration of the factors, the UAA factors identified in federal regulations at 13110G, which preclude the attainment. And in our case, we found that the REC 1 and REC 2, and in some cases REC 2 uses, were precluded by hydrologic modifications and, for the most part, low flow conditions as well. As far as implementation strategies for the new E. coli objectives, again, based on the 1986 criteria guidance, the amendments speak to the use of single sample maximum values for E. coli for REC 1 waters. And pursuant to the 1986 guidance, we went through the process of tiering waters, our inland fresh surface waters, based on the level of intensity of REC 1 use, and assigned different single sample maximum values based on that level of intensity of use. The 1986 guidance explicitly calls for the use of an equation to calculate single sample maximum values on a site-specific basis, taking site-specific variability in bacterial data into account. It also allows for a default value, and the amendments include both that equation and the default. Coming back to the concern about REC 2 waters and numeric objectives, the approach that we have taken in view of the fact that there is no scientific basis to develop REC 2 objectives, we have employed another aspect of water quality standards, and that is anti-degradation requirements, to identify anti-degradation targets for REC 2 only waters. And the concept here is that these targets would serve as sort of a marker for us to evaluate water quality conditions over time. If we see evidence that these targets are being violated, then that would serve as a trigger for us to go out and take additional investigatory or control action is appropriate. And let me point out that the anti-degradation targets that we've calculated are as stringent as the REC 2 objectives that we would calculate were we to do so through the typical arbitrary procedure of 5 times or 10 times the REC 1 objective. The implementation strategies also include a temporary high flow suspension of REC standards. This is comparable to an approach employed and approved for Region 4. And of course, monitoring is an essential component of the implementation strategy. As I believe you know, we've had quite a bit of conversation and back and forth with US EPA. Some of those discussions included John Bishop and other members of State Board staff. And one of the issues has been the use attainability analyses reports and whether or not we had provided sufficient documentation and justification to support the de-designations. And the result of those conversations was that we agreed to provide UAA summary reports and then to prepare reformatted UAA reports. And the basic purpose of the UAA reports was to respond to EPA's concern and comment to us that the UAA reports could bear better organization and improvement in clarity, and that was really the intent of the reformatted reports, to do just that. I think to some extent the comments that we got from US EPA on the UAA reports reflected a lack of knowledge or understanding of some of the efforts that are underway in this region to take bacteria control efforts. And this particularly pertained to EPA stated concern that we had not adequately addressed the protection of downstream beneficial uses. In the record, in the administrative record for this matter, we have extensive documentation related to comprehensive bacteria reduction plans, MS4 permit requirements, and other efforts that have been taken and are underway now to address those efforts. So the reformatted UAA reports include some elaboration of what we recognize, both our recognition of the need to protect downstream uses and the efforts that are underway to do so. And to some extent that meant just pulling information from references or citations in the UAA reports and putting them in the reformatted reports themselves. Let me emphasize that through this UAA summary process and reformatting of reports process, we made no changes to the basic recommendations for changes to the designations. Once again, speaking to US EPA concerning the proposed amendments, EPA has indicated that they would not likely approve the single sample maximum value for E. coli for REC waters where the SSM is based on Tier D, or is specified for Tier D or rarely used waters, and the default value for our Tier D waters is 575. The 2012 EPA criteria specify a statistical threshold value of 410, and that assumes a geometric mean of 126. So again, EPA has indicated that they may not be able to approve the 575, which exceeds the statistical threshold value of 410. This is a very small piece of the overall REC standards amendments puzzle and does not cause us concern. These Tier D waters are in fact rarely used, and may in the future be the subjects of future use attainability analyses. Let me skip this recommendation for now, since we are going to try and go through the some of the rest of the presentation at least.
Just show some of the pictures of what you're talking about. If you
Sure.
can just tell the story about what you did with the extensive stakeholder involvement.
The photographs that I had are related to the UAA waters, and a physical presence means all the difference, and perhaps a picture is also worth 1,000 words. This is the Santa Ana Delhi Reach 1. You can see nature of the construction, the low flow in a pilot channel surrounded by commercial and industrial development. It would be difficult to get access even adjacent to the channel, let alone in it. So this is one of those waters for which the regional board approved the D designation of Rec 1 and also not to designate Rec 2. This is another part of the same channel, Santa Ana Delhi Channel down in Orange County. And this is an example, I think, of sort of quintessential Rec 2 type of activity, where we obviously have proximity to the water, and this young individual appears to be engaged in looking at the water, perhaps to see whether he can detect any kind of fish or other organisms. Again, not Rec 1. Flows here very shallow, but this would be a Rec 2. Another part of the Santa Ana Delhi Channel, the Tidal Prism. This is immediately upstream of Newport Bay, and as the nature of the beast would imply, this is a tidal prism, so the level of flow can vary. But you can see that by the nature of the streambacks, et cetera, that access here would be very difficult and very dangerous. I should step back and take note of the fact that the UAAs that we conducted in the Santa Ana region, the first step was to conduct and gather a whole lot of technical information, which was done by one of our consultants, CDM. And CDM prepared technical reports, for want of a better term, that reviewed information as to the nature of the channel modifications, water quality data, flow data, adjacent land use, public access and safety considerations. And we also had CDM collect information concerning probable future use. Does it appear that there are any plans related to changes to the channel or surrounding areas such that recreational activities might be encouraged? Regional board staff took that technical information and in the January 12, 2012 staff reports pulled a lot of that information into UAA subsections of the overall staff report, and we used that information to justify our own conclusions and recommendations for the regional board for what designation changes might be appropriate. So in part, just because of the size and complexity of that record, I think that made our January 2012 staff reports fairly lengthy and fairly complicated. And again, that was one of the reasons that we agreed to EPA's request to prepare some reformatted reports and try and improve our organization and clarity. This particular stream reach, the Tidal Prism, no Rec 1, but we would identify as Rec 2. Here we have the Greenville Banning Channel. Again, the Tidal Prism, this empties not too far downstream of this location into the Santa Ana River, and that's about 1.5 miles up coast from the Pacific Ocean. You see a bicycle trail here and a walking trail, and we certainly recommend this for Rec 2, but not for Rec 1, I think for fairly obvious reasons. It would be extremely dangerous and hazardous to get into the channel. It is theoretically possible to enter the channel from the Santa Ana River downstream and move your way up. Our argument is, A, that we've never seen that kind of activity, and B, that it would be far preferential to remain in the Santa Ana River per se, in much more natural condition, or to go down to the Pacific Ocean. One other thing that if I can beg your indulgence, that I should take note of. In the course of these UAAs, we utilized remote cameras at selected locations, and we did our best to have these cameras situated at each location for about a year so that we could see the course of a year. And we had the cameras ideally taking pictures every 15 minutes during daylight hours. Naturally, we had some maintenance problems now and again, and we had some vandalism problems, but nevertheless, we collected thousands to tens of thousands of photographs and reviewed each of those photographs to determine whether we saw any evidence of physical presence of humans, and if so, what type of activity they recorded. As far as we know, this kind of use of remote photography is unprecedented, certainly in the state and perhaps even in the country. Another part of a Greenville banning channel is Reach 1 upstream of the Tidal Prism, of course, and as you can see, during dry weather flow, we're lucky to have flow. And once again, this is a channel that would be very, very difficult to get into. Upstream of this point, there are some residences that back up to the channel, but are specifically segregated from the channel by walls and fencing and things of that sort. So this is one of those areas that we believe should not be designated either Rec 1 or Rec 2. Temescal Creek, Reach 1A in the upper part of the watershed. This is tributary to the Santa Ana River. And this reach, we had photographs that we had about 11,000 photographs here, and we saw 2 instances of incidental contact where there may have been somebody touching the water, and we had about 31 people actually walking in the channel. It became fairly obvious to us that the channel was being used as basically a transportation corridor to get from that bridge to the next bridge. This is one of those areas where, again, the task force took and we took a conservative approach. We said not Rec 1, but given that people were present and we'd seen them, we do recommend Rec 2.
Are there many more? I think.
I'm sorry?
Are there many more? I think you can speed through. Good, okay.
Okay. Neither Rec 1 nor Rec 2. Neither Rec 1 nor Rec 2. This is just upstream, and this channel has some dry weather flow, but also gets some wastewater effluent. The depths are typically very, very shallow. This is upstream of the point of the confluence with flows from one of our publicly owned treatment works. And I'm not sure that I need to belabor the rest of the amendment.
No, I think that was helpful, I think, unless there are questions, because I know people have been fairly fully briefed. I just always think it's helpful to see pictures.
Pictures are worth 1,000
yes,
words. They really
are.
are. And so let me, I have to show you the Santa Ana River. I mentioned environmental justice.
Yeah.
When we went to tiering our waters based on intensity of use, we recognized that we had ocean waters that are used by hundreds of thousands of people. And in looking at the Santa Ana River Reach 3, which is one of our principal recreation areas in the Santa Ana region, we have orders of magnitude less use here. Nevertheless, for the purposes of assigning single sample maximum values, we treat the Santa Ana River Reach 3 the same as we did, or we would, ocean beaches. This was in view of the fact that for many people, they're not going to have an opportunity to get to the beach, but they can come to the Santa Ana River. And they use it. I know there's been a concern or a question as to whether or not we should ask you to postpone consideration of these amendments pending the development of a statewide bacteria objectives policy, and our answer is an affirmative, no, please don't. The standards that the regional board improved in June of 2012 are a truly significant improvement over the standards that are in place now. We do not see the development of a statewide objectives policy as a bar to reconciling any differences with respect to the objectives in the future. And moreover, many of the amendments do not rely on the statewide objectives policy. Use attainability analysis, temporary high flow suspension of standards. So to cut to the chase, I will just ask that you approve the amendments that the regional board approved in June of 2012 with the executive officer corrections on February 12th and November 14th, 2013, and authorize the executive director or his designee to submit the amendments to OAL and US EPA.
Thank you very, very much. Questions? Comments?
Just a comment. I think this particular amendment probably holds the record for going through at least 3 state water board members' liaisons.
I think that's probably true. Yes, thank you for all of your thoughtful work.
Yeah, this is a culmination of a lot of effort on staff's behalf as well as many stakeholders, and it's a careful assessment of what it means to have water contact recreation. Of course, now I look at this and I see at the fine scale that you were operating at, and you know what concerns me as a person with basin planning experience is, you know, when you take this effort and want to replicate it around the state, you know, and you know, do you feel that in Region 8 you've looked at all of your water bodies and have come to, you know, resolution on the appropriate level of scale on all those different reaches and that sort of thing? And could you comment on, you know, whether other regions should undertake some similar type of effort? Because, you know, I'm a basin planner and a lot of other things, but, you know, in an ideal world we would map the state and with respect to where recreation happens. You've done that. This seems prohibitive to really extrapolate to other regions, but I may be wrong. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Perhaps the way to look at this would be in the course of basin planning or TMDLs. Ask the question of whether there are waters where you have some questions about whether control actions are either appropriate or necessary, and does it make sense to review the standards of those waters to make sure that you have things right before you move to identify responsible parties. So in the future, for I think UAAs that we would contemplate, the question is it worth the effort? Does it make sense? Is there a strong reason to do the UAAs? Apart from everybody wants to get the standards right, that's important, but we also recognize that we only have so much in the way of resources to do these sorts of things. So let's focus on areas where it's truly meaningful. It's interesting that in conversations with Heal the Bay has suggested that the state develop some UAA criteria that could be used by other regional boards and to do UAA so that we're doing them consistently throughout the state. I think from our point of view, we wouldn't object to that process at all. Other states have specific UAA guidance and criteria whereby they decide about recreational uses. I think in Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa, for example, they do sort of almost drive-by UAAs looking at recreational uses, and they look at the depth of flow in a water body, and if it's less than a meter, it's considered not Rec 1. If it's less than half a meter, I believe, it's not Rec 2. Now, they supplement that, obviously, with interviews with local parties. So they want to understand. But, I mean, it's a fairly simplified process, and they have specific forms. I don't think we would object to that. I would certainly object if developing that kind of approach was used as a prerequisite to your consideration of approval of the amendments today.
Thanks. I appreciate the discussion on that because, it's a lot of work.
All right, we have a few speakers. Mark Rodabaugh, San Bernardino County Flood Control District.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I'm going to defer some of the details to my colleague Jason and Tim and Larry McKinney to give you some details. I am with the San Bernardino County Flood Control District, and I represent the San Bernardino County Area-Wide Stormwater Program, which is comprised of the district, the county, and 16 additional co-permittee cities within the Santa Ana watershed in our county. And we just want to go on record in support of this basin plan amendment. It allows us to take some finite and scarce resources and put them where they create the best benefit for the public. And that concludes my comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jason Yulee, Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District.
Okay,
Is it Uli or Yulee?
it's Yulee, actually,
got
thank
it
you.
right.
Yes, my name's Jason Yulee with Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District, and I actually have a presentation, which I'm going to try to do very quickly because I understand I'm standing between you and lunch.
Well, you maybe ask the folks who are on item number 9, because we're going to have to decide if we're going to keep going or have lunch. As I warned people, hopefully they got a snack at the break.
Understood. And so, Riverside County Flood Control serves as the coordinating permittee for the Riverside County Stormwater Program, so I'm providing comments on behalf of them today. And I'd just like to lead off by noting that, this basin plan amendment represents a commitment on behalf of the local discharges, the local environmental community, the regional board staff, to do a thorough scientific evaluation of recreational standards with sort of and to live with the outcomes with sort of a quid pro quo that whatever those outcomes be positive or negative, that we would take proactive action to address the revised water quality standards. And I want to be explicitly clear that the goal of this was never to spend less. The goal of this was to spend more effectively and to make sure that the dollars that we were putting towards recreational standards were solving real problems, addressing real issues, and moving the bar towards compliance faster. And that's important to us because when we can go back to our elected officials and show success, it creates a positive feedback loop. And it helps to get more resources for the program.
It makes Tam happy, too.
And it makes Tam happy too, which is even more important.
Even more.
And the other thing I want to point out is that although this basin plan amendment is coming before you today, it has served as the foundation for 10 years worth of regulatory effort. TMDLs have been adopted, permits have been adopted, compliance plans have adopted, and BMPs have been implemented. Millions of dollars has been expended based on the foundation that we were doing the right thing and that this basin plan amendment would move forward. In much the same way as what we were hearing from the Central Coast folks earlier today, we're looking at the rec standards, but everyone recognized that action was required now, and so we did move forward. And so what I want to talk about is some of those actions that we took to move forward. One of the things that was very central to the effort of this basin plan amendment was that we focused on real problems. And so we used a number of source tracking techniques to really try to identify where there are human inputs into the system, where there are human bacterial contamination directly as opposed to other forms of bacterial contamination. And based on various types of source tracking, we prioritized our outfalls, and then based on those that had the highest signals, the most persistent exceedances of fecal objectives, the most significant hits for human sourced bacteria, we went into the watersheds and did additional source assessment work. And the goal was always to try to find those human sources because those are the ones that were likely to make people sick. And so as a result of those efforts, which we have spent probably $1 million on cumulatively in many multiple years, we identified sewer cross connections that were eliminated. We identified homeless encampments that we either were able to eliminate and relocate or that we're better managing now to minimize their impact on receiving waters. In some cases, we even found leaking septics or mismanaged septic systems that were now being properly managed and controlled. But in other cases, we weren't always able to find the sources, and so we had to look at other management measures. One of the things we're doing is looking at trying to eliminate dry weather flows. We've installed these little meters which measure depth of flow in our channels to help us identify. We go out and we look at our channels and there's a base flow, but flow may change over time, and so this helps us to look for are there sources that we're missing that we can track down and also prove out that we're actually reducing flow over time. And by reducing flow, we reduce load, improve water quality protection. In other cases, we may need to look at structural interventions. And so these include things like dry weather diversion projects, retrofit projects, and similar. There are several UAAs that are included in this Basin Plan Amendment. One of them is for Temescal Channel. And the purpose of this UAA was to really just specifically look at this channel because this is a concrete-lined rectangular channel in an industrial area that was designated Rec 1. We would have had to spend millions of dollars protecting all of the inlets to this channel. By having a thorough evaluation of the rec uses and determining that this was in fact not Rec 1, it opened the opportunity for a downstream regional diversion project that we're currently planning that takes that base flow out of the channel and moves it into underutilized recharge basins, providing not only a water conservation benefit and integrated approach, but also ensuring more effective and proactive protection of the downstream beneficial uses where they really occur, where we have the real recreational use. We're looking for other types of similar activities right now. And then finally, one of the last things we learned is that when we started this, we knew about 80% of the load to the river was unaccounted for. We have no idea where it was coming from. We chose not to use that as an excuse. We chose to move forward with taking action on those things that we knew we could better regulate. Now we've got control of those items, we're coming back to start to look at that 80% of the uncontrollable load, or unknown load, to see where is the source of that, and what are the opportunities for control, and then how can we better manage that to get to the rec standards that we've all agreed to implement. And so with that, I'll just close by saying this has always been about action. This has always been about effective use of the resources. This is a multi-million-dollar effort that's being implemented by the 3 counties, and we would encourage you to approve the Basin Plan Amendment that's before you today.
Great,
In
thank
respect-
you. Thank you for that excellent presentation, which dovetails with the presentation we're having later today. Thank you. Larry McKinney from SAPA.
Good afternoon. I'm Larry McKinney. I work for the Santa Ana Water Project Authority, and I've chaired the Stormwater Quality Standards Task Force since its inception in 2003. This is actually the 3rd job that I've had while serving in that role. The first 2 jobs that I had during that time all involved me working on the task force side representing the County of Orange. I used to be Jason Yulee for Orange County. So, I want to say a couple of words without being too redundant with everyone else about the intent of the original intent of the task force, and then a little bit more about how we tried to implement that intent through our outreach efforts. And I want to acknowledge Stephen Moore's comment about how this was a very intensive effort for us. I didn't actually update my numbers and bring them with me, but I believe that the cost share partners of the task force has spent about $3 million on consultant work mainly in this process, which is the smaller part of what we've spent. The bigger part of what we've spent is the time of all the task force members coming to all of the meetings. And we did this because it came out of the triennial review process, and we said we wanted to identify what the most appropriate standards were for our region. And it may be that our region is unique, and that the level of effort that we've put into this is maybe more than needs to be done statewide. From my position when I was representing Orange County, it was certainly my view that we wanted to recognize that body contact recreation, mainly at the beaches, is the foundation of a huge part of the regional economy and the Orange County economy, and that we were not interested in becoming the region with the reputation of having laxer standards than anybody else. So we were very clear that we wanted appropriate standards and that we wanted to have the appropriate basis for those standards. And we wanted those to be science-based. So our intent was to find those most appropriate standards, to spend the money that we were spending most effectively, as others have mentioned, to actually improve public health protection by better focusing the money we were spending. To do this with full legal compliance, both in terms of the substance of what we presented and also procedurally how it's been presented, all the notice requirements and so forth being met. And we wanted, and we said this from the very beginning, we wanted to develop a product that was easily approvable. Because we've been through the process in the Santa Ana region of putting major effort into a process to develop basin plan amendments and in the end having them rejected. So we said at the beginning that we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure that whatever we came up with was well within the bounds of what was easily approvable both by the regional board, the state board, and by EPA. To do that, we adopted a process within the task force of developing consensus as a decision-making model, and also our goal was to end up at this point that we're at today with no opposition. And so we had an outreach effort to ensure that we had people at the table. So briefly, our process has been mentioned was an open process where anybody could participate. A couple of other key illustrations of that is we knew we wanted US EPA to participate, and the EPA staff in San Francisco told us that they were going to have a very difficult time participating in meetings like this. So the task force agreed to pay US EPA travel to attend meetings when they could attend, and they did attend a number of the meetings earlier on. We knew that we wanted NGO participation. We approached Orange County Coastkeeper, and they participated. The Inland Empire Waterkeeper participated. I visited NRDC's offices and asked them to participate. They came to one of the meetings, and I think that their decision was that they were going to watch from afar, and they didn't come back and participate in other meetings. They felt comfortable with that. We asked Coastkeeper to help us to recruit other NGOs that we knew should be at the table. It was represented to the task force by Coastkeeper that they were conferring with their friends and colleagues outside of the meetings, and that some of their environmental community colleagues felt comfortable with Coastkeeper letting them know what was going on, and we actually did take positions on issues because we were told that one thing we were proposing or another wouldn't fly with those people. So we felt like they were being told what was going on. Also, in terms of the openness of our process, the SAPA website has had all of the documents for this process all along. There's been nearly 100 different types of reports and so forth that were presented and that were available for comment all through the process. We had numerous Brown Act notice meetings throughout the years, including more than a dozen regional board workshops, briefings at the counties, at the SAPA Commission, and actually we've been here before to talk about it, so it's been publicly acknowledged. We had more than 50 task force meetings. At almost all of those task force meetings, we had people that participated by telephone, so that was available for folks that couldn't get there. And in some, we think it's been a very comprehensive participatory process, and we think that the product that we've developed has been very influenced by that, and it is very different from what we would have come up with if it was just originally a group of stormwater permittees that developed it. It would have been a very different product. So we're very pleased with the product. We think it's the right thing to do, and we urge its approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney.
Quick question, is there anything you would have done differently?
That's a big question. I hope that we've learned something in 10 years of doing this. I think that there were some points in time when we probably really bent over so far backwards to achieve consensus that we may have lost some windows of opportunity to move ahead. I don't think there's any reason this should have taken 11 years to do, but here we are. So I don't know, it's always that balance between developing consensus and getting everybody on board and actually reaching a conclusion. It's been frustrating almost to the point of alarming to get to this point and then have the suggestion made that, well, now EPA has come up with a new approach. Or maybe now the statewide effort is going to move ahead after all these years of us watching it. And if we were to not reach our conclusion now because of those things, that would be very, very frustrating. But finding some way to move faster is critical.
Thank you. And then finally, Susan Saucerman from EPA.
Hi, my name's Susan Saucerman, and I work in the Water Quality Standards and TMDL Division in EPA Region 9 in San Francisco, and we'd like to provide some very brief and very general comments to give an EPA perspective on the recreational use amendments before you. And I want to start with telling you that we really appreciate the additional time and effort that the regional board staff put into this amendment in the past year. They worked really closely with us and clarified a lot of the issues that we raised previously. And we very much appreciate it. A lot of grueling hours with Dave and Tim over here. And we did get through a lot of the issues. And EPA recognizes that resources are very limited and that designated uses, where appropriate, can be lifted so that the resources can be directed more effectively towards areas that are used recreationally more heavily than other areas. In general, we'd like to see more restoration efforts in urban areas in order to give more recreational opportunities for urban residents, much like Los Angeles is doing with the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan, which is in an area that has similar challenges with modified water bodies and pathogens. We're concerned that this type of amendment discourages restoration efforts and sets a precedent that if a water body is modified in any way and access is denied, that then the recreational use is not attainable. And we don't hold that view. Each use attainability analysis that comes before us will have to have its own merit and stand up on its own justification. And will be looked at separately. We need to note, as a couple of people have already, that U.S. EPA has completed their new water quality standards for recreational criteria in November of 2012, and all amendments forward that have to do with recreational uses and criteria will have to be as protective as those criteria. And we also note, as a couple of people have previously, that the state board's working towards recreational criteria for statewide consistency and equal protection for all recreational waters. That's it. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much for coming. Questions? Thank you. Questions or comments from my colleagues? All right.
Fading from hunger, so I will move for adoption of this item.
Right.
And thank the staff and the stakeholder for your years of commitment and work on this project. Decades, I guess. 1 decade plus 1 year.
Second. I'll just say a thank you, too, for the extent. Sometimes when you're doing something challenging, it takes, you all have gone the extra, not the extra mile, but probably the extra marathon on this one. I want to thank you for your patience with everyone, and in this particular one, we'll find a way to do it thoughtfully and perhaps faster in other places. And as usual, we'll call on you for your expertise as we talk to other regions and think about what to do at the state level. So with that, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, carries. I was going to try and start, I think, since I have a board member fainting from hunger, that's never a good way to enter something. So my apologies to those of you on item 9 who thought we might make it. I thought we might too, but I am, on the other hand, going to just make it a half hour. So we will come back right at 1 o'clock and start promptly. Thank you.
You could have gone without me.
No.